All right, guys. First thing on the agenda is review of the January 7th minutes. Does anyone have any questions, changes, anything like that? If not, can I get a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
Any
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No one opposed. Next thing to do is going to be election of chairperson. And I guess we'll have, Robert, you run that, or do you want me to do it?
Oh, I mean, it's just a nomination in a second.
Okay.
And
Do we have any nominations for chair?
I'll nominate David if he's interested in staying on. I have no problem with that, and I make a motion.
I'll second.
Anyone else? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And all opposed?
I saw Neil put his hand up.
Thanks, Neil.
Aye.
All right, next,
Said aye.
election of a vice chair.
I'll nominate Deanne.
I will second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No one opposed? Good to go.
Thank you.
All right, so kind of a changeover. We don't have Cheryl here anymore. Andrew Cook will hopefully be joining us here
He's in
soon.
traffic.
Okay, so he'll be here in a minute. So let's go ahead and get into agenda item B, which is discussion about the commercial lighting ordinance. Robert, you're up.
Does it say this?
Lighting memo, yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yep.
so this memo is a little dated before a couple of weeks ago. It says specifically commercial lighting, but I think the direction from everybody involved is that they would really just rather address it. So this discussion is about what the planning board wants me to bring to you. Maybe not next month, but I'll just give you a little bit of background. So when we wrote the new proposed ordinance, taking into account the ad hoc committee's report, we completely reorganized it, which is why I don't have anything for you tonight, because to update the language in it, to at least modernize the language, and to not make too many impacts to, unsuspecting citizens, if you will, which I don't really know where that's coming from, because what's in the ordinance is basically what's in the old ordinance is basically in the new ordinance. There's essentially nothing new in it. I mean, there's a couple of restrictions that apply to pole height, and a couple of more things for me to do as administrator. But the bottom line is, if you're out of compliance in the new stuff, then you are out of compliance with the old stuff. So with that in mind, I think that if we only approach it from a reorganization and updating to modern language, I would still like to use the same approach as far as organization is concerned, and the new illustrations and the new definitions, because I really do believe that in the rewritten ordinance, it's just easier to find everything. It's easier to understand. I don't think that it makes significant change to the current ordinance, with the exception of what I just explained. But with that being said, there are some things that do need to be addressed, and that is not so much in residential, because with new construction, we already do, final zoning inspections that include me at least standing in the street, seeing if there's a bare light source that I can see, and then contacting the builder and saying, hey, you got to put some sort of shield over that, whatever. However, there are some issues in the commercial districts, all of them, and it's not any one individual. Some are worse than others that need to be dealt with, but honestly, they can be dealt with, from my understanding, with the current ordinance. So with that being said, that's what this discussion is about. Exactly, you've all read it. presumably the new stuff. I say new, the
Yep.
reorganized stuff. You've all read it. We've done several presentations, so you at least understand the majority of it. I think we're over the worst part of the learning curve. And this is your discussion for me to get direction on what I need to bring to you in the future.
Right.
And that's, if you have any technical questions about it, then I can answer those questions. But this is just for discussion so that I know where I need to go with this.
Gotcha.
So.
I'll start, and then, Neil, I'm gonna let you go, since you're on web, let me start, and then I'll let you go, ask, because I'm sure you have some questions, if that's good with you. I think it's important, and Robert, I've talked to you this, and we had a new ordinance brought to us. And I think the residents of Wrightsville Beach heard about a new lighting ordinance and was thinking, oh my goodness, what is going on? So everything that you've said, including today, that everything that we want to try to accomplish can be accomplished in the 2012 version of the ordinance, which is, I think originally was maybe a 2003, is that when it first, somewhere?
Probably somewhere close to that.
So
It's about 20 years old, and you can tell by the language, like, they just didn't
Yes.
update the language in 2012, but it's clearly an older, there's older terminology and.
Yeah, and so I think that if we can accomplish what we're looking to accomplish by using the language that you just used, updating the current ordinance
Right.
instead of proposing a new ordinance, I think that has a much softer connotation than we're gonna have a new ordinance with potentially an enforcement division. And I don't wanna say it scares, but it worries the residents a little less by using that current, and especially with the more egregious ones, because we really haven't enforced the 2012 lighting ordinance.
Right, and a lot of that comes from the fact that our lighting ordinance is complaint driven for
Right.
the most part.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some very obvious issues that we try to deal with when we see them.
Right.
But we're here during daylight hours,
Oh, yeah.
so for the most part, when something like that happens, I still have to come out and take pictures because I don't like sending people letters when I can't show them what the issue is.
How often do you get those?
Well, I would say probably about, 4 or 5 times a year, about every.
So not weekly?
No. It's not an ongoing issue. But I will tell you, we started getting more complaints the cheaper and brighter lights got. So that has definitely, so LED lighting has gotten brighter and cheaper, and that just makes everybody think that it just has to go everywhere. And so I have gotten a lot more complaints in the past year or so since COVID. As we all know, there was essentially a development boom that happened here.
Right.
And just for reference, that year and the year after, I was averaging about 25 CAMA permits. And that only indicates what's on the waterfront. That doesn't even account for what we were building on the interior of the island. So this past year, I issued 8.
Yeah.
So the scale of development over the past couple of years, it's obviously dipped, but there was a relatively big boom for about 2 years there.
Would that relate to Florence?
No, not
No?
really, no. There were properties were selling all over the place. Basically people were getting out and demoing the old houses and building new ones. And the new houses that go up are much brighter.
And it's even smaller jobs than just demoing the houses. It's changing lighting fixtures, because
Yeah.
during COVID, I lived on the beach
Yeah,
for
so-
doing nothing for a month.
And that honestly is just an anecdotal, observation of mine, from doing my zoning permits, driving around town, looking at, new construction and everything like that. So, when you have that much redevelopment of old property, then a lot of the old situations come in. You
Right.
get a lot of new situations coming in, and the new situations are that the houses are simply brighter. Lots more external lighting. You hire these super expensive architects to build your awesome custom home, and you want to show it off. I I understand that. That was not the philosophy when the majority of the houses were originally built on this island.
Have complaints
I can
gone
assure
up?
you.
Right.
A little bit, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Commercial and residential or just residential?
Mostly residential, honestly, but those I deal with using the current ordinance. But there, like I said, there are some issues with commercial that there's safety concerns when it comes to commercial properties that are not necessarily annoying enough to the residents to make a complaint. So that's where the focus for commercial needs to be a little bit different than the focus for residential. So I think that it's a little bit more important to go ahead and be slightly less complaint driven in the commercial field, a little bit more complaint driven in the residential. And the only way that I know to do that is to present to you some of the commercial changes,
Right.
maybe not so many of the residential changes. Now, with all of that being said, I will say that dock and pier lighting,
That's a separate issue. That's a safety
right,
issue.
it's also a safety issue. So, I mean, that needs to be addressed on the residential side of it.
I agree.
But, you know, as far as like lights up the trees, lights through your walkway, maybe not so much. I mean, it might be pleasant even to your neighbors, that's fine. But to boaters, you get into safety issues. In commercial districts, you get into safety issues. So that's my impression of where we should be heading.
Yep.
And I can proceed to write that for you. We just needed to have this discussion so that I could start that process.
Let me let Neil go first, just because
Neil had a question.
I won't see.
Let me see if he needs to be turned up
Can you
too.
hear us, Neil?
I can hear you fine.
I can't hear you.
I don't necessarily have to go next.
Well, I would have missed you raising your hand.
I might have been picking my nose. I don't know. No. Okay. So Robert, you said something very early on in your comments there about the new technology, LED lighting and brightness, and something you didn't touch upon in the documentation. It's in the ordinance rewrite, but it's not. It wasn't in your cover memo, and that is the issue of the Kelvin maximum number of 3,000. And that makes a huge difference. And that's why I sent that picture, I think I sent it last night, with regard to the impact of what that specific issue does. And I would say that in the residential area, Kelvin, holding that line on Kelvin will make a dramatic change. Getting the right kind of fixtures in place, absolutely, because there's so many, as we found in the ad hoc committee, and Robert validated it through his assessment across the town. Somewhat, it was a random selection, but nonetheless, it played out the fact that there is such a huge amount of non-compliance, both residential and commercial. And that Kelvin issue is an important issue. I just wanted to raise that flag. And the other thing is, when you talk about the commercial, and I was thinking about this as you drive south on you drive south on North Lumina, and you head towards Breeza, and you're in this area where you've got a lot of people at nighttime crossing the street. Lighting is quite variable through there, and yet what you have in the background is Breeza being a very highly lit and, my assessment, non-compliant in very many ways. So you have a very brightly lit space, and you have a lot of pedestrian engagement at night. So the safety issue, I think, is there's really good examples of where safety is at risk simply because of the amount of light intrusion from the commercial area. So I wanted to raise those two issues.
That makes sense. That also falls under what we were talking about. We did tweak the light ratio table at the end of the lighting ordinance to more accurately reflect what we thought that people would want as far as safety concerns in commercial parking lots, but not being so bright that they were blinding you. And I think that we hit a pretty good happy medium on where the brightness of a commercial property needs to be and how it can be measured. So I think that all of our assessment and the ad hoc committee's report is really good, but it's basically an advisory board to an advisory board to the governing board. So taking the information that we've received from the ad hoc committee, which I was there, as, staff support for the ad hoc committee, and I'm here to support you guys. I think it's time to move from the ad hoc committee's report and refine it to the way that you feel the Board of Aldermen would more like to see it. Because ultimately, any sort of legislative decision is a political decision, while a quasi-judicial decision would not be the same. So that's where I think, in my opinion, where we're headed. So we need to take the ad hoc committee's information, which we refined our original ordinance down and adjusted, and now we're here at the planning board level, and now we need to refine and adjust it to your taste, and then we take it to the Board of Aldermen, and either they kick it back or
change it or do whatever.
Or make suggestions or what have you. Yes.
All right, questions?
Can somebody direct me to where the dog, because I want to say something about dogs.
Was it page 6
And
or
that was
7?
my question. So hypothetically, if you're investigating a violation that's on the water, dock, whatever, would you then
Here it is.
need to address
17.
any other violations because you're on that property?
Yes.
Okay.
Say that again, Mark, I'm sorry, I was looking, can you say that
If
again?
hypothetically, if he's addressing dock issue, lighting on the docks or whatever, would he then need to address all the other? I mean, in other words, can you just pay attention to the docks, or now if they have uplighting in their
Not
trees?
lighting.
And
I
that-
can't go out to somebody's house with blinders on if that's what you
Yeah,
mean.
that's,
It's like if
I
go out-
I didn't think you could. but
Yeah,
I'm
if
saying
I go
so
out for a response on a violation, then if I'm
it's
on,
gonna be all, it's
While
gonna
you're
be-
there, you're gonna,
yeah, I gotta take notes. I mean, that's just the right thing to do. But to be fair, 9 times out of 10, because the houses are so close together and fenced in, the only way that I can assess what is a safety issue and thereby, in my opinion, clearly a lighting violation issue is to go across the water and look across the channel to see where it's at. And then, I contact the owner. I try to set up a site visit so that we can talk about it. And usually that addresses the issue.
Right.
And I mean, even in one case, somebody was complaining about a light. I went out with my lumimeter. I said, it's just not bright. It's diffused. You can't see the light source. That's it. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm not really sure where the complaint is. I mean, I guess they just didn't like that, where that light was. It was a back porch light. And I understand that, some things annoy people more than others. But in this case, I was standing at their property line with a lumen meter and it barely registered. And I looked at it to make sure that the light bulb was covered, and it was behind a frosted shield. And I was like, that light is perfectly compliant. And that's it. That was the end of it.
I want to bring up docks because,
Yes.
and I brought this, only because I was a part of this, that I didn't get a letter, I didn't see this letter, but there was a stretch of all my neighbors on Waynett that they were told, because a lot of people had the Edison lights and the da-da-da-da, there has to be lighting for security, for trespassing, theft. I can just go on about that all day.
Sure.
But, so there's got to be some lighting on the docks. But when I say we were told, I was told that everybody was told that couldn't have any lights. So literally, all my neighbors got rid of their lights. I mean, there was not a light within 10 blocks of my house on a dock, except for Blockade Road. Of course, theirs is all lit up. So then Tony, remember this, came out, looked, my neighbor wanted to put their Edison lights back and put them up underneath the rafters, and they did. Tony looked at them and said they were fine. I would like to see some kind of clear, because a lot of people have not put their lights back.
Okay.
And their docks are pitch black. And that's fine, if that's their choice, but they're doing it, I think most of them are doing it because they were under the impression they couldn't have lights at the end of their docks, where their little houses are, their little complete
So,
houses.
to my understanding, as in our current ordinance, which it's fairly ambiguous, which is why we like to change things, because ambiguity, you just can't enforce ambiguity. But to my understanding, with our current ordinance, you can still have those down, I'm not sure what they're called, but typically you'll see.
Pedestal lights,
What's that?
pedestal lights.
Yeah, you'll see the pedestal lights
Yeah.
attached to the poles.
With
They
the little
shine
shades,
down.
yeah, and little shades over.
Exactly.
But I'm talking about under the gazebos, where
Okay.
your boats are docked, at the end where your slips are. The lighting that you can see your boat to make sure no one's on it,
Right.
stealing it,
So
whatever.
now with that, in that situation, as long as the lights are not seen, like the bare light source, the filament of the bulb, if you will, even if it's an LED, the source of it isn't seen from any right of way, including the water, there's nothing wrong with the illumination that creates as long as it is not considered a safety hazard. In that case, what I have seen, some houses are overly lit, and I have to go across the water and take a picture of the glare on the water to tell, to send them a letter, and it's like, somebody's gonna run into something if you turn on your back porch light. I'm just, in that sort of situation. So with what you just said, as long as the bulb is tucked up under and not visible from the right of way.
And that's what I've told a few
Right.
people. I would just like to see it clearly written, this is what you can do. Because like I said, I
Right.
think there's some people out there that think they can't have lights on.
Well, the problem with ordinances is we don't tell them what they can do. We only tell them what they can't do
True.
in most cases. But I mean, I'll be happy to pick up the phone anytime somebody has a question, and I will go out on site and we'll talk about whatever they want to talk about.
Well, that's what I tell them, call
So,
over.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why I'm here. I have site visits all the time. I'll go out and talk to anybody, so.
And you mentioned earlier about a lighting that was behind glass that was, what,
It's frosted.
frosted?
Yeah, the
But if
light.
the light bulb's still hanging down, is that, I still thought that would still not be
Well, if the
compliant.
light bulb is hanging below the
see
shield,
that, yeah.
then, yeah, that's not.
Even though it's behind frosted glass?
Well, it would need to be behind it and obscure the bulb itself. So it basically just serves as a diffuser. It
Okay.
diffuses the light, which is more important than blocking the light bulb altogether. It's,
That much.
yeah, the idea is to diffuse the light so that you don't like burn your retinas out, looking at somebody's front yard.
Could I make a comment here?
Uh,
To Margaret's question about a frosted glass, you can totally obliterate what the frosted glass is going to accomplish by putting too powerful a bulb behind it. So a frosted glass installation isn't necessarily going to address the issue if you, like I say, you put a very powerful bulb behind it. You'll still get a point source, and it'll still be too bright. So to Leanne's comment about docks and, clearly what can people do? If you step through what's allowed, you should come to an acceptable result. So for instance, hanging any bulbs that have the exposed filament, if you hang those bulbs and they're not hidden in some way, then you're going to see those, and that would be a non-compliance.
Yeah.
If you tuck them up, then you should be okay.
What I'm saying is that, and I knew that because Tony came out it helped my neighbor. You remember he walked out there and looked, you said, but my point of all that was to say, I'd like to see it clearly so that we understand it, because we've read this how many times?
A bunch.
But for neighbors, people that don't come to meetings or don't see what we see, they don't know. So how do
But
we?
that's on, but
How do
all
we
due
get it out
respect, that's on them. I mean, we discuss what the ad hoc committee has brought to us about what they think we should do with lighting, what they think we should do with docks, what they think we should do with commercial. We then allow public comment, like we have public comment, someone's gonna come here today to talk to us about their feelings. And then we take all of that after talking with our neighbors and come up with some sort of recommendation that we're gonna send to the Board of Aldermen. Just because they don't know, I know that they've had the opportunity, because I've seen it on the sign, that we're having a planning board
Just
meeting.
go read the ordinance book.
Well, a lot of people,
Yeah, because
I'm talking about people don't even live here, they're not here.
which is fine, but I mean, if you
Seasonally.
commit a crime, you didn't know it was a crime, it's still a crime.
Yeah,
I mean, so ignorance is no defense. for the law, and it's no defense in here either,
Ignorance of the
so,
law is no excuse.
yeah, so.
Lost my thought, never mind.
Well, I hadn't read this, because that's why I said, okay, where is this?
Welcome to the club, Robert.
I wanted it to be clear so that
Oh, I
I
get
could
it,
say to
yeah.
my neighbors, go
Look at
look at the
stuff.
order. I wanted to
Yeah,
make
read
sure,
the- yeah,
because I don't have my
read the
glasses
Oh,
tonight,
you're
but
good. It's pretty good, and
so that they'll understand, because I'm not the keeper.
And I talked to Robert about maybe making it its own subsection, so we can bold it, dots, peers.
Right, and I think
And it's such a
that,
new
I
list.
think the reorganization with the new version takes care of a lot of the concerns, because it is kind of confusing, because there's a whole residential section, commercial section, and then there's a commercial piers and docks section, and then there's some piers and docks section. I mean, well, what we try to do is, between residential and commercial, we try to get rid of those redundancies and put them in a general section.
Right.
So that if anything applied to the general section, then it applied to you, regardless of where you were at. And if anything in the residential section applied to residential, and then there was a commercial, basically, instead of having like 4 or 5 different subsections, we simplified it down so that there was a generic lighting ordinance that applied to everything. And then there were some special considerations for residential and special considerations for commercial. I mean, but with that being said, we didn't create these things out of nothing. You know, it basically came from our existing ordinance.
Didn't you give us a chart kind of thing that showed us?
Yeah, Neil made one. I
Yeah,
thought
what you
I,
redlined and all that.
yeah, I think it was,
And it's really not that much that the old ordinance doesn't cover.
it looks like a lot, because what happens is with the reorganization, you're removing it from that section and you're placing it in another section. So if you didn't read the old one and you didn't compare it to the new one, you would just assume that we were tossing out the old for an entirely new thing. And that's what it looks like in the strike through underline version, but there's actually the majority of the changes that made it look that way was a reorganization, and the fact that we changed things from wattage to foot candles and lumens and things like, a modernized language so that
Definitely needed.
right, because when you go to Lowe's or Home Depot, I'm not trying to advocate for any particular home improvement store, but if you go to the store and you
Right.
pick out a light bulb, it's not going to tell you, it'll tell you what the wattage equivalent is.
Right.
In 10 years, will it? Are we going to adopt a new lighting ordinance every time a marketing campaign removes an outdated term? Because that's what's happening now. We're in a transition phase where they're saying that this is 5 lumens, 60 watt equivalent. Eventually that will go away and it will just be this, and then, then we won't know what the ordinance is actually trying to tell us. And that's sort of the point of updating the language for the most part.
So it seems to me that the most important thing we're trying to accomplish when we look at a commercial standpoint is enforcement and figuring out some of the lighting issues, whether it be at Breeza, whether it be at other places on the beach.
Right.
You mentioned a couple things and the most egregious residential areas too, trying to maybe dial those back as well. And we can do that within the 2012 ordinance. So one thing we talked about is enforcement. And we've talked about this before. Is there a way, I think Leanne and I talked about this, is there a way that we can get someone, whether it be you, to come in late and on a Wednesday or whatever, Tuesday, whatever day it is, and when it's dark out, just ride around the island for 30 minutes?
I don't have a problem with that.
And that may help us identify some of the most egregious issues.
I think that instead of putting something like that in an ordinance, that is more of a department policy.
Oh, I agree.
Discussion.
We don't need to
So-
do that, but.
So no, as far as a policy is concerned, yeah, I don't think anybody would have a problem with that.
Okay.
But as far as an ordinance goes, that's just
I
something
don't
we have to
know.
have on a separate conversation.
No, I agree, and I don't think you need to put it in the ordinance, but
Right.
enforcement, if enforcement is really what we're looking for to address commercial and some of the most egregious residential, we need to know about the most egregious residential.
Right.
Obviously, I think we all know where the problems are with commercial.
Yes.
And we don't have to, I just, me personally, I don't think that we need to tell residents in Wrightsville Beach, the 75 or 80%, that they need to change all of their light bulbs
Right.
and all of their light fixtures. Because I don't think that's what
That's
they
where
want
your
us.
pushback is for sure gonna come from.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we can take care of the egregious ones, the red lights on the banister that
Right.
we all know about.
Well, the color of the light is not spelled out in the current ordinance, so,
Right, but that's something we can update, because we talked about
Yes.
blue and red a couple weeks ago, I think, or a couple months ago about.
and I'm not gonna speculate.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna, yes.
So
you're
yeah,
correct.
so I would just, if we can do something like that, we're making a difference in terms of the lighting in Wrightsville Beach, where people at least know that, that someone's out there taking a look at the lights, and if you have huge lights shining on your house and shining on your neighbors, you're probably gonna get a letter asking you to stop it, and we fix the commercial. So that's why I believe that we should update the 2012 version instead of passing a new 2025 lighting ordinance.
Okay,
So that's basically what we have to decide.
What we wanna do.
Yeah, and I mean, that makes sense, and I mean, I would like to hear what Kitty and Neil have to say, because they did work on it for a year?
Over a year, right?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
So I would be interested in y'all's thoughts on what David just said about,
Well, I discovered that there's so much of the old ordinance that's just not enforced.
right.
And that if you started there with the old ordinance and started enforcing some of them. And again, manpower's, I mean, I'm not criticizing anybody because it's not enforced. But it's got so many of it, the rules in it, that, there's no reason to throw them out and start with a whole new one. Except the commercial
Of course, yep.
and the docks. That's basically new. But as far as residential goes, it's there. Yeah. Now Neil, of course, digs a lot deeper than I do, so but like I said, we spent a lot of time on it, and we ended up, basically, when you saw his chart, they were almost exactly the same.
Right.
Changing lumens and stuff like that with the new vocabulary. But Robert did a super job on changing it, because it'd have a little piece here and a little piece there, and so he took like all the residential and put it in one spot. And if commercial and residential were alike, then they were all together.
General, right.
So the
instead of
second one
having
was
all
much
these-
easier to read,
yeah.
for sure.
He
No question.
organized it so that if they had anything alike, they were all in the same section. So.
it would
which
certainly
was-
be a lot easier and clearer and easier to send to the Board of Aldermen that way.
what, excuse me, what would be easier? to send
No,
to
I'm
the-
saying as far as,
Revised.
you're asking me, Neil?
Yes,
Speak a little louder, Neil.
yes, Leanne.
And I was just saying that what David was saying, that just taking the 2012 and making the changes instead of adopting a whole new ordinance. I mean, that's, I think would be,
And then he made a vocabulary section too, that's
Yeah.
really
And
good.
that's important, and,
Yes.
and, I don't know
Yeah.
what in 15 years they're gonna be called, it probably won't be called lumens anymore.
Yeah.
But if we can have an ordinance that all you have to do is change some of that verbiage, it just makes sense to me.
Neil, what do
What
you,
I'm not clear, I'm not following something here. The revision was tightening up language and organizing for an improved way of understanding it. So I'm not sure what's the halfway in between what is currently there and what's now transpired as the revision. It's not, I'm missing something. What is it that's in the revision that is problematic, that might need to be considered to be redone or reworded versus, are you suggesting that we start over and rewrite from the current? If you do, I can't see how you're not going to wind up where we wound up with the revised.
I can give you a specific example of one thing that we changed that actually added more restriction to residential, and that was that we were looking at a ratio, a lighting ratio, much in the same vein as the commercial section that we didn't reinvent the wheel in any of this. I mean, it came from all over the place, but So I mean, that might be one residential concern that could, could be tossed out. I mean, just thinking of things.
Robert, where is that? Where can you point me to in the ordinance? Because I missed that piece.
I think actually we may have already taken that out now that I'm thinking about it. I've rewritten this thing so many times.
Yeah, Robert, I don't think it's there.
Neil, you said something when you were asking your question that I wrote down. You were talking about the, I think, 3,000 lumens, and you said that would make a dramatic change in residential properties.
Kelvin, not lumens.
Sorry, but you said it would make a dramatic change in residential properties, and I'm not interested in making a dramatic change in residential properties. I only speak for myself, but I think there's things we can do with the docks. I think there's things we can do with commercial properties, but from listening to residents on this beach and what they want to do, they're not interested in making dramatic changes to their houses, and
So
that's what I've heard.
the issue with the 3,000 Kelvin is that it mitigates some of the fixtures that are completely in non-compliance today. Put a dimmer bulb and a different color in it, and you probably don't have to change out the fixture as often as you will encounter. I can give you 3 examples. They're across the street from me and next to me. So I'm just saying that if they change their bulbs to 3,000 Kelvin or less, I think they don't have to change out fixtures. And we're talking about, I don't know.
I understand.
In 3 houses, that's all.
And
As an example.
we disagree. So I respect where you're coming from.
Well, the word dramatic change is that it subdues the lighting that has become egregious based on what Robert said up front, which is the lighting intensity, cheap fixtures and lumens, excessive lumens, has kind of exploded the space with light. So when I say dramatic change, it's in consequence of dramatic change.
Robert, what do you think of that?
I mean, I understand every aspect of the pros and the cons of a Kelvin limit on a light bulb. I understand that. It's really not my job to determine what that's going to look like. But I will say, just not to get too sidetracked, I do want to say that the reason why I thought that the residential was in that chart is because that was one of the last things that I took out of that chart. And we made this maximum illumination standard only commercial, when originally we had a pretty extensive conversation about including it in residential, and we did take that out. So I was mistaken there, sorry.
And we did receive professional guidance about focusing just on the commercial.
Yeah, and there were lots of site visits for commercial parking lots, and if I remember correctly, when we were deciding on the maximum illumination standards, these are actually more relaxed than what's in the current ordinance, because what ended up happening was we were like, okay, well, that lighting that's pretty pleasant. It turns out it's a little bit brighter than what we actually allow according to the chart. So, I think what we learned was when it comes to area lighting, there's a huge difference than focused lighting.
Right.
Like I don't necessarily believe that the subject of the conversation needs to be how bright a parking lot is. It really needs to be how bright that light shining through your windshield is when you're driving down the road.
Right.
And I think that's really the problem with commercial. Not necessarily for residential, but there's a whole nuisance part of the residential aspect that I really don't want to get into that should be covered by bare light sources and limiting uplighting. So,
And a lot of that's in the original 2012.
Yes.
Okay.
exactly.
So
If I could just make one other comment, David, it's unfortunate / sad that the word you picked up on was, the word I used was dramatic. And it was more in the context of, for a simple change in a Kelvin number on a light bulb, a problem really gets dramatically less. And that's what that is. It
I
wasn't to
appreciate-
say,
I
I'm
appreciate it.
looking to inflict pain on the community. But the
You know,
outdoor space in the residential area is one's personal space, and you want to enjoy it and not be intruded by others. That's all, and that's the light trespass issue, so.
I mean, as a zoning administrator, I mean, I can just tell you that if the lighting is out of compliance, you have a reasonable expectation that your neighbor is not, violating your own rights when it comes to, enjoying your own space. That's why we need people to make complaints. And that's why we don't have more complaints, is because people are, people historically just want to let people be, no matter how aggravated they are. That's been my experience with talking to people, where it's like somebody will finally pick up the phone and they're like, look, I've dealt with this for 10 years. And my first question is why? This ordinance has existed for longer than that, and they were just like, it's like, I've been dealing with this for 10 years. I can't take it anymore. Well, we really should not have come to this point. But.
And another thing they say is, if I tell on my neighbor, they're gonna know that it was me.
Right.
Like I've had somebody ask me to do that for them so that they won't know it was them.
Start charging for that.
The 3,000 Kelvin number didn't come out of thin air. In fact, it came from one of the aldermen who was.
From what? One of the aldermen?
One of the aldermen.
Yeah.
That wasn't any of our guys didn't suggest that? Robert?
What now?
The 3,000 didn't come from any of our people?
I think that we had a discussion about it with our consultant.
Yeah,
And the 3,000 Kelvin number is actually in the rewritten ordinance. It's,
Right.
I was sitting here, I was actually looking at it, but I think the 3,000 Kelvin number really only applies,
to commercial,
yeah,
yep,
that's what I was looking at.
yep.
No, it's not. It applies across the board.
Is it?
What'd you say to you?
He said it applies across the board, so going back to the,
And it was strongly suggested by Ken.
yeah.
Neil, I've got a question. Neil,
Digging into Kelvin.
so
Yeah.
with regards, if we went down, like you're saying the 3,000 lumens?
Yeah, as the max.
Oh, here it is, yeah.
Right, so does that mean that when you're saying that it'll almost pull everything into compliance, are you saying they wouldn't have to, if they were at that level, they wouldn't have to be shielded?
No, they still,
Oh, no.
everything
They
is.
would
No,
have
I-
to fix the
still
whole.
have to
I
replace the
said
picture.
it would probably reduce what would be a complainable situation. People would
Okay.
see it as complainable.
I'd have to remove you.
It's actually on page 16 in the general lighting regulations, so it does apply across the board. Under subsection A, under motion activated lighting, it's there. Under subsection B1A, it's also there, 3,000 Kelvin.
Docks and piers.
Yeah, docks and piers, so yeah, it appears all throughout the ordinance, because that was the number, that was the warmth that was suggested. It's also in commercial, yeah, it's all throughout, it's riddled all throughout the ordinance. That was what was suggested by the consultant, because he had worked with
You're
local
opposed to
communities.
putting something like that in it? A restriction?
From not for commercial or docks, no, I'm not opposed to that. I'm opposed from a residential standpoint, because at that point, you are telling every resident that they're 75% of the residents that they're gonna need to change their lights.
The light
Your
bulb.
Light
bulb.
bulb.
Bulbs and or fixtures if they're, I mean, the fixtures you're gonna have to change anyway. But above 3,000 lumens, even in a frosted,
No, not the lumens, the Kelvin.
sorry, 3,000 Kelvin, you still could have issues even if they're
So,
frosted.
yeah, so I think what Neil is saying, I'm just gonna try to paraphrase it and bring it down. You can have I'm just gonna use a random number, you can have a 100 lumen bulb
Right,
that is a bright white and a 100 lumen bulb that is an amber. And this one will have significantly less complaints
Right.
than the bright white one. And that's what Neil was getting at.
That's the Kelvin.
The Kelvin,
Kelvin,
yes. So the argument there is that all you're really doing is switching out a light bulb.
Right.
So,
Well, I think
much
it was
like our
explained to us.
tree
Not
ordinance,
the fixture.
But that's, yeah, what he was talking about 3 fixtures. I
okay,
know Neil was saying he had houses with 3 fixtures. Is that what you're talking about? Your 3 fixtures?
What I was saying was that I have at least 3 houses next to me and in front of me that have egregious, highly bright bulbs and non-compliant fixtures. And if they just change their light bulb, I would probably be fine. But when I sit on my deck, I have this bright white light from, 3 different sides. If I turn my head to talk to my wife, I've got that light in my front of me. If I turn my head to talk to somebody sitting at the chair at the edge of the deck, I have that other light in front of me. So just
But it was-
change the light bulb out.
But that's
So-
the whole point of what Robert just said is you're waiting. If they're non-compliant right now,
Have you gone to see him?
That's what I would do.
Yeah.
I took some
I'd
pictures
go
when
call
I
the
was
neighbor.
doing this.
I mean, that's the whole-
Say, hey, I'll buy the light
Now,
bulbs.
I will say this.
Do you mind changing to an
yeah, if
amber?
it's shining in your porch, that's the whole thing. Not waiting
Instead of
10
going
years to
right
do it.
For him.
Right, I mean,
I'm trying to work for the neighbor first.
Yeah,
not
let's.
necessarily. I will say this, I want to bring in another ordinance, just as a compare and contrast, if you will. Our tree ordinance, we have 2 protected trees, and that is a live oak and a cypress. You can cut out either one of those trees if they're under if they're under a certain diameter,
Right.
at rest height.
Or just add one.
Right.
South
So the thing is, with that, you simply have to replace it. I'm not going to get into that part, but what I will say is you can cut down any tree in Wrightsville Beach. You have to replace it with something else, though. But we don't tell them what to replace them with. We simply have a chart that is a recommended planting. So I've never agreed with our tree ordinance just because we protect cypresses and live oaks, but we don't tell them that if you cut it down, you need to put a cypress or a live oak back. What we do is they cut them down and then they put up a palm tree somewhere.
With uplighting.
Kitty. And then, so, I mean, what we can do, I mean, if it reaches some sort of, happy medium, we can make a suggested Kelvin for a good neighbor suggestion, if you will, in the lighting ordinance. I mean, we already do that in the tree ordinance. So, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel, but we do have a suggested, we do have some sections in our ordinance that are suggestions. Okay. So, I mean, that's
No,
always a
I see what you're
possibility.
saying. I'm getting back
I'm
to
a little bit, you need to help me with this. If my neighbor, and I had a neighbor call me about my front porch lights, because it shined right in his bedroom, I cut it off immediately.
right.
But, I don't see anything wrong with us saying that you could have a certain amount of, what's the word, Kay?
Kelvin.
Kelvin.
Get it
Yeah.
That we could put that in there, because what if they use like a spotlight or something?
But you
I
can
mean, I don't
address
think
that in
that's
the current
even-
ordinance, right?
Now, a spotlight will get you trespassed.
Yeah, right.
But
I'm exaggerating.
I'm good with changing terminology around, but what I'm saying is we can address exactly the situation that we're talking about in the 2012 ordinance.
Okay, can we put a limited Kelvin in the 2012 ordinance? Is that in there?
That's not in the
It's not in
2012,
there.
no. That's
So we have
something
to add
new
that.
That would be added.
that's what Kitty and
Yeah.
Neil are saying, is like, it was a big topic of discussion, because, I mean, you can get the same brightness out of a much less aggressive light.
Right.
And that's where the conversation really came down to a lot of times, is instead of limiting lumens, you would limit Kelvin. So you still get the same brightness. And I can tell you, you can go out to the Reddix parking lot and they have an amber light and they have a bright white light. And Duke Energy put those in, not Reddix. I'm just telling you where they're at. And I took a reading with the lumen meter, and the amber light was very pleasant. But much to my surprise, it was significantly brighter than the white light. So, I mean, that's just been my experience. So,
Another place you can go look at one, if you go down South Lumina on my street between Blockade Road, right around 30, I see I'm 32, 31, there's an amber street light now that they put in, and right down from it's a regular street light, and it's night and day. And it's like you said, pleasant.
Right.
And it's actually,
it's actually brighter.
it's actually nice,
Yeah.
you know, it's just not in your face.
So I mean, that's really where a lot of the
So I see where
conversation
Neil was coming from.
started, yeah.
It's just-
I understand the concern, sorry.
Go ahead, you go.
I understand the concern of 85% of the residents, you have to change out all your light bulbs. I mean, if it's just the light bulbs, it's not fixtures, what if we were to have, you have 12 months to do this? That way everybody has proper
That's in there.
notice, that type of thing, because
That's in there.
if you've got 12 months to change a light bulb, I mean, that's not.
Well, I think our,
We do have
It's
some
in
time.
there.
There is
I think our sunsetting clause in there was like 2 years or
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that.
That's,
We do,
Something,
yeah.
I'm basing my opinion on what we've heard from, I think people don't want,
I think
Especially
people
when-
thought that you had to go take all your lights
Yeah.
down.
well, there was, I mean, we actually had someone came up here
Exactly.
that advocated for
Yeah, they were
an
concerned
enforcement
about that.
officer. And they were on the committee, and I know that's kind of where Neil's getting with this too. And I just don't think that we need an enforcement officer to come in Wrightsville Beach and tell them that they need to change their light bulbs. Because that is getting so far away from what I believe Wrightsville Beach should be.
So what I can do,
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you just said I was advocating. I'm advocating something, like a.
I said someone came in, I said someone came, during the public hearing and advocated for an enforcement officer to enforce the new, ordinance.
one of the public speakers. So what I can do with the input that I've got tonight is I can tweak the rewrite. And when I bring it to the planning board, y'all can take out whatever you like in the voting process. I mean, that's what it's for. It is a legislative decision. So you can talk to as many people as you want. You can talk to whoever you want to. They don't, I mean, you know, it's a legislative decision. You're not constrained with conflicts of interest when it comes to this particular decision. So I can write it with some Kelvin
Yes.
aspects of it in there, bring it to you, and
Then we can take it out if
y'all
we don't
take it
like it.
out, then you take it out. I mean, that's.
Can you bring the, because apparently there was an expert that talked about the 3,000 limit or
Yes.
kelvins. Can you bring whoever the,
Yeah, I can send him an email and ask him if he can come to that particular planning board meeting. Like I say, I don't think it'll be the next planning
and
board meeting.
he, I don't even need him to be here, but I would love to see whatever, industry standards he was talking about.
Oh, okay, yeah, there's a big giant book.
About the
that's
3,000,
crazy.
well, yeah, if you can send us that about the 3,000
Sure.
Kelvin, how that's an industry standard.
Most people.
Or just have it in our
Yeah.
Yeah, in
agenda.
the package, yeah.
Most people are not, if you have an offensive light on your property, like, see, I didn't even realize mine was offensive until my neighbor told me. And so, there's not many people that said, just gonna say, I'm not gonna change my light bulb, I don't care what it bothers me.
That's what I was gonna say.
And I don't think we should go, and again, if it's not offensive, I don't think we should go around and tell them they have to change their light bulb.
Well, but if it's offensive, that's another
That's fine.
thing.
If it's not
Absolutely.
in compliance.
Well, to be
though.
offensive, you've got to have a rule. I mean, you've got to say.
Well,
I
to
mean,
be-
Compliance, not
I might
offensive,
think it's offensive
compliance.
and you don't, so there's it. But if we
Right.
have something written that says 3,000,
And then someone complains about it, and then it's above 3,000,
That's right.
I don't have a problem with
Okay.
that. What I have a problem with is us saying you have to replace all of your light bulbs or light fixtures in 2 years, depending on what type of light fixtures you have. And if not, we're going to send you a letter to find
I
them.
don't understand,
I
I don't
agree with
understand.
that.
That's not what
and I
we're
don't
looking
think
to
that's
do.
our purpose at all.
Well,
I mean, with that.
I don't understand the
I'm kidding.
conversation that
With
says.
all
all
orders.
li-
but when someone came up here and
Yeah.
said, we need an enforcement officer, that was 100% the
Yeah.
intent of that committee member.
And I think that created I
You
think
know,
a panic, a little bit of a panic went
Yes.
through, and everybody
Yep.
was like, because I heard it too, and I saw it on social media, you know, people went into a panic, they want to change all their, and that's not what anybody's saying, that you have to change all your fixtures.
I mean, and you and I have talked to, if you go back to that old ordinance, there's not much in there that you can't use.
And just update that, and if you wanna put
Yes.
that 3,000 in there as a way,
Yes.
if there's a complaint-driven process, and you go out there and it's greater than 3,000 Kelvin, that's fine.
I think a majority of people, I know that I would, I think a majority of people down here, you're always gonna have that person that's gonna say, nobody's gonna tell me what to do.
Right.
But I think the majority of people want to be kind, and I hope they want to be
Absolutely,
kind.
yeah.
And change their light bulb, it's not a big deal.
I don't
You
think a
know,
majority of the people would want to change their light fixtures.
No, exactly, no, they don't, I
But
agree
the
with you
light bulb,
100%.
yeah.
If you drive through
Changing a
Harbor,
bulb,
South Harbor, every house
No, I
has to
know.
change.
But
But
changing a
asking your neighbor to
bulb,
change a
change a
bulb,
bulb,
yes,
that's fine.
most people would say, no problem.
Yeah, totally agree.
Exactly.
If you look at the new
Christmas lights.
construction in the past 2
Really good.
years, there's been a ton of non-compliant lighting put in place.
absolutely.
A ton of it.
No,
And a lot of them are not residents. They're investment property.
Neil, say that
And I
again.
don't have any problem with it. No.
I think you got a lot of houses being built now, they're all glass, they're all windows, and they have no blinds, no drapes, the houses are lit up, they've got lights inside showing their artwork off, and, which makes it look brighter,
Yes.
I think.
You're right. You're
you
exactly
know,
right.
and I think
You're at
that's,
the beach, you want to have.
Every example that you wanna talk about, you just ride right down that road right there.
yeah.
They're all there, every.
Me, I'm closed up in my house with the blinds down, but a lot of people, like you just said it earlier, wanna show off their houses. So, you know, got all these windows
I get it.
now, and
All right, so bring us back your revised
Katie,
whatever.
really quickly, can
And
we
we'll
do
do
a
it.
public comment real quick? 'Cause I know that,
Excuse me.
does anyone have any public comment?
I'm here only to listen and to ask for a copy of the writing when it's done. This is sort of like the octopus with a 4.5-year gestation. We've been at this, I've had a lot of copies,
We're
but
coming to the end.
I don't know where we are now, and so if we can get a copy in terms of.
You'd like his new copy,
I would
right?
like the
Yes.
newest copy of the writing we can
Yeah,
get,
with
so
this
that then I can take that to the commercial sector and the
That's a good
residents
one.
that are members as well.
so right here,
And that,
No, but his new
I'm waiting for the new writing.
He'll put it out, he'll put it out.
the new.
We don't have the new
The
yet.
newest new that's
So-
gonna be there.
The
2025 one.
So, Robert, can we make sure to put that online? Or-
Absolutely.
I bring,
Yeah, I mean, that's all part of the public
Yep, yep.
process.
I bring to Robert and Tony and to you, David, and the board, the dilemma of Senate Bill 382. And somebody needs to ask, because it is the hurricane relief bill, which appears as though it will pass, not be, or maybe vetoed by the governor, but it'll be overridden. But it dramatically changes the role and the spectrum of local zoning requirements. And if we're moving forward with this, and with almost any of our zoning work, somebody for the beach needs to do the same thing that we're doing for the county and the city of Wilmington in exploring what that's gonna mean, because it impacts all of us. So those are my two offerings
mayor
and
know that?
requests.
Does the mayor know that?
Oh, I'm sure he does. I just wrote it down so that I can dig it up.
Well, it's in the governor's office, it's waiting the 24 days or the veto or whatever. It is, of course, what everyone is talking about because it is called the Hurricane Helene recovery bill.
Okay.
But in it, there are 782 other issues. So that's a, it's a new way.
that lady wasn't.
And
Can they still override
Say
it?
something
Can they still override a
and
veto?
I don't want him to be frustrated.
Are there
Yes.
enough numbers?
No, he was trying
Yeah.
to say something and he was getting over it.
Okay.
I'll give him a chance after this.
Robert, those are my two things really.
I got you.
But they need to come through.
Any,
Robert, what's your last name?
O'Quinn. I'm not related to Robert O'Quinn, the former mayor,
That was
but
my second question.
there's no nepotism involved.
And what's your title? What is your
I'm town planner.
town, you are the town planner.
Well, I mean, Tony is too. He's the director, but I'm
what's that?
the designated town planner.
All right, any other public comment?
Yeah,
If you can come on up and
Sure.
introduce yourself to the board, please.
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Bev Holt.
And you live on Wrightsville Beach?
I'm a citizen of Wrightsville Beach, have been for a while. first of all, I think it's great that we have a lighting ordinance, because nobody comes to Wrightsville Beach and wants it to look like Myrtle Beach. We don't want all those lights, we don't want, those, fancy golf party places where you can go and, tee off and it's lit up really bright. So I'm glad there's ordinances, and I understand safety first too. That's also something that, you have to be careful with. But, the reason I came to this meeting is because I'm looking across the street at the size of these poles that are going up over the pickleball courts and tennis courts. What is it, you said that's gone into the town planning, how tall can those poles be?
60 feet.
Those are 60 feet.
They've already been,
Yeah, they've already been approved.
Approved by what?
Well, I mean, under what is currently in the ordinance, they're allowed. So the way an ordinance change works is you have vested rights. So if you apply for a permit before a rule change, and then a rule changes in the middle of your project, you can choose whichever rule you want to go with.
Is that what happened here?
Well, yeah, because we haven't approved any sort of ordinance, but yes, that's basically, there's no restriction currently on a sporting field or under the government campus, which is where the pickleball court lies. So the architect of the courts over there, the designer, said to minimize the number of lights, you have to go higher, and that's just what they decided on. I mean, that's what they approved when they applied for their permits.
And they will also be duplicated when the new courts are built, right? They'll do another set of lights?
I think they've installed what's out there. I don't know of any other.
I don't know of any other that's going
There's
up.
only, that's it?
I haven't looked at the final lights out there.
Yeah, I mean, we have the site plan back in the planning department, and I'm pretty sure that what's up is all that's planned.
Right, well, you alluded to in your October video that the town wasn't in compliance with a few things.
Right, we are in compliance
And
because
you're
we
also
don't include ourselves
You
in
don't have to be.
You also slid one through.
Right.
Well, what I worry about, committee, is that it will be a very bright eyesore in the middle of Wrightsville Beach. And I play pickleball. I broke my arm playing pickleball. And it doesn't make me bitter against pickleball or tennis or anything else, but I think it's going to be very, very bright over there when those lights are up, and they've been approved already, and makes me very upset.
But aren't they gonna go off at a certain time at night?
Is it 10
10
o'clock?
o'clock.
10 o'clock, okay, wasn't sure, I don't play pickleball, so.
But again, the 10 o'clock was, I don't know, was that 10 o'clock? I don't know how things work, how everybody just decides 10 o'clock's a good time. Why not 9 o'clock?
I would say typically parks, I know parks around Wilmington, 10 o'clock is
Or
the
10
time,
o'clock,
is the time
okay,
when they
all
go
right.
off.
And then another thing, the taller, there's less poles and less lights, the taller it was some of their reasoning too, that they thought it wouldn't be as bright.
The designer also said that those particular lights, the way that they're aimed, would not, you wouldn't get light trespass beyond the courts. I mean, we did have that discussion. I mean, sure, illumination is one thing, but as far as like beams of light, like a lighthouse, you wouldn't get that same effect. I mean, those lights are directed at the campus. They're not intended to light everything, the entire area. I mean,
They look like they're long
that's what
and
the
they're
designer was
shaded.
telling us when we got
Yeah,
the
they did come and
plan.
speak to us that time too.
Yes.
About them?
Yeah.
For us.
That this part
Yeah, it was last
is
year.
less, with the taller light, it comes more like this.
Yeah, it's more directed downward
Yeah.
instead of.
Yeah, they got a
Where I
shield
live-
over them too.
Where I live, those folks will be right in my eyesight line, so I can't see figure eight.
I suggest you go to the visitor center and you stand on the side porch, and it will give you exactly the picture of what is being lit. And the intent is for safety, but it does light the whole area. And we had an incident of someone indicating that we were breaking the lighting ordinance because we had hung lights for Christmas.
Well, you're allowed to do that from October 15th to January 1st.
Hardly
Yeah.
see the hung lights.
You're not in violation of the ordinance. You're allowed for holiday.
I'm even after the holiday, but
Okay.
until we have lighting back there, the cameras aren't seeing anything, so.
Gotcha. Yes, ma'am.
But it's a fact. Our pickleball
Safety
courts
is-
are gonna be well lit.
Safety is also important.
Yeah,
Well, isn't that something that can be addressed if once they're up and they're lit? Because I walked through there last weekend, or Saturday. I walked back there and looked, when I could work my way back there, and I was looking at all the lights, and they look to me, because they're not done, finished, I mean, I guess they're up, but that they were long, and they looked like they were shielded, they had a thing over them.
I'm sure there's industry standards
So
for
I
tennis
would
court lights
say
and pickleball lights.
maybe let's let them get turned on first and see what.
So just be aware that
Sorry.
there are more courts coming, so.
Yeah, I saw that.
I've been told we'll have lights. And I wonder what Pelican Drive residents are saying about this.
We hadn't heard from any of them, have we?
No.
We haven't turned them on, so I'm sure when we turn them on, that's when we'll get the complaints.
It's like I've been here like 50 years, you know. but
Pelicans lit
This
up
went back
anyway.
so
Yeah.
far, where Pelican Drive, if you dared talk about a light over here, they went crazy.
Well,
I mean, even if it was a flashlight,
Jim
they
Smith
went
showed up.
crazy. Now with all that trees and stuff, you don't hear a beep.
Well, Jim will let us know if the lights are.
Yeah, but you don't hear a beep out of them anymore, and I'm like,
Well, you folks know more people than I do, but I have been here since '04, so, I've been here a while too.
I just,
let's wait to
Not
they finish it up and
Yeah.
we'll see what happens. And if there's things we need to adjust or talk about, I'm sure the Board of Aldermen will let us know to discuss it.
absolutely.
I agree. Yeah, I'm interested to see what the pickleball courts look like now,
Yeah.
because if I'm not mistaken, there was a photometric plan involved with that site.
Sure, there
plan.
had-
It seems
had to
there
be.
had to.
Had to be, yeah.
So,
it will be a good thing because there are other things happening on our porch because there is no lighting. And that is why, we hung the lights.
Oh, I understand.
yes.
Well, now they'll just be after 10 o'clock.
Walking over there.
All right, moving on. So,
Check with Neil, he was trying.
Neil, do you have anything to say?
I'm concerned that the way this gets characterized around this table is not doing a service to the community by characterizing, I've heard it several times from the table, changing out 85% of their lights. That's like publishing, an hysterical headline, and that's not the case.
I really have trouble.
It's been well thought out.
Can't understand it.
Been well thought out. I'm sorry, could you hear me? I don't know.
No, I can't
Kinda
understand
muffled,
you.
Neil,
I'm sorry, there were three people talking this.
hold on a second.
No, I wasn't saying 85% of the lights were to be changed. I think what we had originally talked about is when Robert went through and looked at neighborhoods, he came up with about 70 to 75% of the houses would be non-compliant with some of their lights. Is that accurate, Robert?
Correct.
That's what Robert told us when he drove
Yes,
through.
he did.
So that's where
Right.
that's where,
Okay, and the fix to that thing is, kind of a multi-legged creature. So it isn't come in with a chainsaw, cut down all the lights and, and start from scratch. And I think we're doing a disservice to the community by characterizing it in that kind of a vein. And that's not the case. I will also say that if we're gonna go, if Robert's gonna go back and try and redraft from the original to some other new halfway point, I think that's a big mistake as well. We should be working with the current revision and making adjustments to that if that's what this is about.
that was the plan.
we're gonna work on the 2012 and try to update 2012 using some of the language that we talked about and focus on docks, focus on commercial mainly, and then also add in the 3,000 Kelvin.
So are we
Compared to
voting on
the-
that, or are we not voting on that? Because so far,
We're not,
David.
we're not
That was
voting,
the
so
discussion.
we're asking Robert to bring us something back here in 2 weeks, that focuses on that.
2 weeks.
Oh, sorry, 2 meetings. 2 meetings. 2 meetings,
So much
8 weeks,
fun,
right?
can't wait to get
So
back.
maybe the April meeting, we can
Possibly.
have something, April or May.
Neil, he's not throwing away the newest one, he's just gonna incorporate it.
Which is what we did. So I'm sorry if I'm confused. I would propose that we strongly recommend to Robert that he keeps the 3,000 in there. It was a specific request from the Board of Aldermen. It makes all the sense in the world based on a consultant, and I think.
We
with the
did.
intelligence-
We said that,
We're going
we
with it.
said that.
Thank you.
They were good.
I think we're good, yeah. Anyone else have anything else? Moving on.
Do not.
So we'll do this in April-ish.
April or May.
Hopefully, yes.
Quick question, what did the aldermen say about the SUP, or have they addressed that, SUP versus?
We hadn't got it ready yet
Okay,
to
cool.
bring back to you guys.
That's fine.
I've gotten a draft, we need to sit back and, not sit back, we need to take it back and
Okay.
sort of hammer down on it, make sure that what I, put in my report is what we want to use.
Good. So no SUPs coming up
We do
anytime
have a
soon?
special use permit application that will, be here for the Methodist Church
Okay.
and their
Just same thing.
columbarium.
Yeah,
That will just be, any of the board's advisement to the applicant. And then it'll go to the Board of Aldermen.
so you're gonna bring the SUP here?
We have to. Our ordinance says we have to.
I thought we changed that, okay,
We haven't changed it yet.
okay, cool, that's fine, yep,
Yeah.
good. All right,
What is your general thought about the SUP? I don't want, I want to see the planning board be involved in that.
well, SUPs,
Well,
the
that's
planning board cannot be involved.
Right, but the
So, yeah, so the
changing
commercial, yeah, that's what we're
The,
talking about.
zoning, the
Commercial zoning.
conditional
Yeah,
zoning.
conditional zoning, I
Conditional
couldn't remember
zoning,
what
sorry.
the.
The planning board will absolutely be involved in conditional
Okay.
zoning because that is a land use decision.
Okay.
Anything
Is there
else?
other business?
Is there
Are
any,
we gonna cover other business?
yeah, we just did that, and we were asking if the board members have anything else. Anything else for
Okay,
staff?
I do.
Go
I
ahead,
have something else.
go ahead, Neil.
So I believe from the last board meeting that the action item, David, was that you were going to go and speak with the Board of Aldermen or some of the aldermen relative to this ordinance, the lighting ordinance. And it's not clear to me that that happened and that you've reported back to the board with whatever that conversation was. So I was kind of surprised when, Robert came forward with the package. And so my first question is, did you have follow-up discussions with the board members and what was the feedback? Because this session seems to be without any indication from the Board of Aldermen. That's what I was expecting that.
What he's asking, what you're asking. I don't know what what are you accusing me of, Neil?
I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm simply saying that you said you were going to have a conversation with the board, with aldermen. You didn't specify who, but I think you may have mentioned Hank. I'm not Hank, Ken.
Right,
And a follow-up conversation to get some direction. And I haven't seen any of that reflected in this
I didn't,
package or in
Just tell me
information
again.
flowing from you. So
Neil, since our last board meeting, I've spoken to Hank, I've spoken to Daryl, I've spoken to Ken, not about the lighting ordinance, but all three of them are on the Board of Aldermen, so I speak to them regularly just about random stuff. I've seen Hank at the UNCW basketball game, talked to
no,
him.
that's not the point. It was specifically to that you had reflected in the
I-
meeting that you were going to do that kind of a
I
conversation.
did not have a meeting with Ken Dahl. In fact, I think Ken actually talked to Robert about some of the stuff.
He called me.
He called Robert. I think when he called him, Robert was out of town. And a couple days later, Robert called Ken back. That may have been a week ago.
Right.
Week ago.
Yes.
And they talked about some things. Robert was going to put together some bullets, but because we were so close to where we were, he put the commercial, he put what you have in front of him.
Right. It had it
That's-
changed a couple times.
Yeah.
From the alderman.
I mean, I think it's important for all of our board members to have communications with the Board of Aldermen, since they're the ones that are directing what we do. That's my feeling.
I'm not disagreeing with that. My point was simply that I left with the understanding that you had a specific action item relative to this agenda item and a conversation and to get direction. And so that's where I was wondering if
No,
there was something more specific. And
I
what you're
think-
saying is
I
that
did not meet with-
conversation
I did not
didn't
meet with
happen
Ken.
and there is not. So that's,
Yeah, I did not
I
meet, and I
understand.
know Ken and Robert talked, and I think I have not talked to Ken since, Robert and Ken talked.
Right. That's my understanding as well. And the feedback that I got from Ken was just,
He was good.
yeah.
He's good with what you presented today, to focus mainly on the commercial and
Yeah,
the
and
docs.
maybe some updates
Tweaks,
for, like modern, basically, he was good with the direction of modernization, illustrations, definitions, focus on commercial,
Docs, too.
and docs. Yeah, that was basically where Ken came from. And the reason why the residential was included in that is because it's my understanding that the Board of Aldermen would rather deal with it once than multiple times.
Right.
Like we are.
Good point.
I think that
We'll do it for you.
That's what they told us to do.
That's what an advisory board is for.
I think we have Robert come back with his revised, then we all look at it.
Sure.
And if we wanna add something to it or
We vote on it,
take something out,
absolutely.
at that point, we can do that.
And then
Yeah, I
vote
mean,
on it.
we've done it plenty of times before, so.
And then vote on it.
And I think we all agree, commercial and docs are,
Cause
Need to
since
be
we,
addressed.
yeah, since we've had a chance, everybody's had a chance to look at it numerous times. We all are better informed, and now when you look at it, you'll know whether you like it or don't like it.
We also need to address the
And if
residential.
Neil wants
too.
to add anything or take anything out
Sure.
at that time, that will be his time to do it. All of us, anybody.
Yeah, so I mean, what we can do and what we have done in the past with a large rewrite, is you could break it up and say, well, I want to add this there, and you could literally vote on that, and then at the end of
Exactly.
it, say,
Yeah.
okay, are we all agreement with this? And, you
Take
might get some
section by
dissent,
section.
but we'll see you can see what happens.
Sure.
Democratic process and whatnot.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Sorry for being late, I was coming in off the road from Raleigh, won't happen
That is
again.
not on that.
Welcome.
Adam told you the meeting started at 5:45, right?
I missed the pledge of allegiance, man.
I will send you the SUP application
Okay.
tomorrow, but I
So-
won't have the memo ready until.
So that's next
couple-
meeting, to SUP.
That'll be next month,
Good.
yes.
Cool, and that should be a pretty simple one, I would imagine,
I
based
suspect it
on
will be. It-
2 months ago.
Like I said, the Board of Aldermen can't even consider what the planning board says at this point. It's more for recommendations for the applicant,
That's great.
so,
Motion
Neil,
to-
do you have anything else?
We're changing that though, right?
yes.
Yeah.
no, I'm fine. I just got to catch a train.
He's good, he's good.
Are you good?
Motion to adjourn, anyone?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.